Podcast Talk.
Learn English naturally.
Why small talk feels so hard?
Small talk is supposed to be easy. A few polite questions, a short answer, and you move on. But for many people, this is the most uncomfortable part of conversation. You freeze, overthink, or feel pressure to sound normal. And the strange part is, this happens even in your own language. So maybe the problem isn't your English at all.
Exactly. People blame vocabulary or grammar, but small talk fails for a different reason. It feels empty. You talk, but you don't connect. You answer, but nothing moves forward. And when a conversation has no direction, it becomes exhausting instead of natural.
That's why so many conversations end with awkward silence. Not because people don't know what to say, but because they don't know how to stay in the moment. Small talk isn't about saying the right thing. It's about creating a small bridge between two people.
And this is where small talk becomes difficult, especially for learners. You're taught that conversation is about information, questions, answers, facts. But real small talk isn't about information at all. It's about emotional alignment. People are quietly asking, are we comfortable? Are we on the same level? Can I relax with you? When those questions remain unanswered, the conversation feels forced. That's why someone can speak perfect English and still struggle with small talk. Because fluency doesn't create comfort, presence does. When you understand this, small talk stops feeling like a test and starts feeling like a shared moment.
I think this explains why small talk feels so draining for so many people. You're not tired because you're speaking English. You're tired because you're performing. You're monitoring your words, your tone, your face, your reactions, all at the same time. Instead of being present, you're managing yourself, and that creates tension. In real life, small talk works best when people allow themselves to be slightly unfinished. You don't need a perfect answer. You need a real one. Even something simple, like, I'm not sure, I'm still waking up, carries more life than a polished sentence that feels empty.
Yes, and people often forget that small talk is not meant to impress. It's meant to regulate comfort. It helps people gently enter a shared space. That's why topics are usually light, repetitive, even boring. Weather, plans, work, weekends. These aren't deep subjects, but they aren't supposed to be. They're emotional warm-ups. When learners expect small talk to be meaningful or interesting right away, they feel disappointed. But its job is much simpler: to check the temperature of the interaction.
And when that temperature check is skipped, conversations feel abrupt. People jump into serious topics too fast or ask questions that feel intrusive. Small talk creates a buffer. It gives both people time to adjust. Learners often think they're wasting time with small talk, but in reality, they're building trust. Without it, even good English can sound sharp or uncomfortable. That's why small talk isn't optional in real conversations. Yes, it's structural.
I have noticed that people who say they hate small talk usually don't hate talking itself. What they actually dislike is the uncertainty that comes with it. Small talk has no clear rules, no clear finish line, and no guarantee that it will turn into something meaningful. You don't know where it's going or if it's going anywhere at all. And that lack of control makes people uncomfortable, especially learners who already feel exposed when they speak. But the moment you accept that small talk isn't supposed to go somewhere specific, the pressure drops. You stop trying to manage the conversation and start simply participating in it.
And once that pressure disappears, something interesting happens. You start listening differently. You notice tone, pauses, small reactions. A half smile, a short laugh, a quiet yeah. These details matter more than clever sentences. Small talk is really about reading the room, not filling it with words. Learners often think silence means failure, but silence can mean comfort. When you allow those small, quiet moments, the conversation feels more human. You're no longer trying to prove your English, you're sharing space with another person.
And that's why small talk feels hard for so many people. It asks for emotional awareness, not performance. You're not expected to say something impressive. You're expected to stay present. When learners shift their focus from, what should I say next, to, what's happening between us right now, everything changes. Conversations slow down, become softer, and feel less exhausting. English stops feeling like something you carry carefully. It becomes something you move through naturally, and that's when small talk finally starts to work.
I think another reason small talk feels so uncomfortable is that people secretly expect it to fail. They enter the conversation already prepared for awkwardness, so every pause feels dangerous. Every short answer feels like rejection. I've noticed this a lot with learners, but also with native speakers. When you expect discomfort, you interpret everything through that lens. A neutral response sounds cold. A pause feels like judgment. And because of that, people tense up and try to escape the moment instead of staying in it. Small talk becomes hard, not because it is hard, but because people don't trust it to be safe.
That's such an important point. Expectation shapes experience. If you expect small talk to be awkward, you'll rush through it or shut down emotionally. And then, of course, it feels bad. Now, many learners tell me they fail at small talk, but what they really do is leave too early to an amro pub, mentally, not physically. Oh, they stop listening, stop reacting, and start planning their exit. Real small talk requires staying longer than feels comfortable at first. Not pushing, just staying. That patience is something people aren't taught, especially in language learning.
And when people do stay, they often realize that small talk has layers. It starts shallow, yes, but if both people remain open, it slowly deepens on its own. Not into something dramatic, but into something human. A shared complaint, a small joke, a quiet agreement. Learners often try to force depth with personal questions too early, but depth isn't invited, it emerges. Small talk is the soil. You don't pull the plant to make it grow, you let it grow.
I really like that metaphor. And it explains why small talk feels unnatural when people treat it like a task. You're not supposed to complete it. You're supposed to sit in it. Oh, when learners focus on doing small talk correctly, they miss the point. There is no correct version. There's only responsiveness. You notice, you adjust, you stay. That's why two people can talk about the weather for 5 minutes and feel connected, while another conversation with better topics feels empty. The difference isn't language, it's presence.
And this is where many learners finally misunderstand small talk. They think the problem is confidence or vocabulary, but it's actually pressure. The pressure to sound normal, the pressure to respond correctly, the pressure to keep the conversation alive by force. Small talk was never meant to carry that weight. It's not there to prove anything about you, it's there to gently test comfort, to feel out the rhythm between two people. When learners realize this, something relaxes. They stop treating every pause as a failure and every short answer as a mistake. Instead, they begin to notice what's happening in the space between them and the other person. And that awareness, not better English, is what makes small talk finally feel lighter.
Another reason small talk feels heavy is because people try to control the outcome. They want the conversation to lead somewhere specific, to friendship, usefulness, or at least a successful ending. But small talk doesn't work like that. It's exploratory. You're both feeling your way through a moment without a map. When learners accept that there is no destination, the tension drops. They stop steering every sentence and allow the interaction to unfold. That shift alone can double how long a conversation lasts, because nothing is being forced.
Yes, and control often shows up as overthinking. People replay what they just said, judge it, and plan the next line before the other person finishes speaking. That mental noise pulls you out of the moment. Small talk needs light attention, not analysis. When learners practice staying with what's being said instead of preparing responses, their reactions become more natural. A nod, a short comment, a quiet laugh. These small signals keep the conversation alive far more effectively than clever sentences.
There's also a misunderstanding about silence. Many people believe any pause means failure, but in real conversation, short silences often mean processing or comfort. Small talk allows micro pauses because it's low stakes. When learners rush to fill every gap, they interrupt that natural rhythm. Letting a second or two pass gives the other person room to continue. Paradoxically, allowing silence often makes conversations longer, not shorter.
I think small talk also feels difficult because it doesn't give instant rewards. There's no clear moment where you feel successful. You don't win small talk. It unfolds slowly, and sometimes it doesn't unfold at all. For learners, that uncertainty can feel frustrating. You put in effort, you speak, and nothing obvious happens. But that doesn't mean it failed. Small talk often works quietly. It creates familiarity, not excitement. It makes the next conversation easier, even if the current one feels neutral. When learners expect immediate feedback, they miss this slow effect. Small talk isn't about the moment itself, it's about what the moment makes possible later.
That's such a good way to describe it. Small talk is cumulative. Each short exchange adds a little familiarity, even if it doesn't feel meaningful at the time. Over time, those small moments stack. The second conversation feels easier. The third feels warmer. Learners often judge small talk too quickly based on how it feels immediately after. But real connection builds through repetition, not intensity. When you allow small talk to do its quiet work, English becomes less stressful. You stop asking, "Was that good enough?" and start trusting the process.
I want to add something important for learners here. Small talk often feels pointless because it doesn't give you control over meaning. You can't decide in advance what it will become. That's uncomfortable, especially if you're used to studying language through structure and outcomes. But real conversations don't follow plans. They respond to mood, timing, and attention. When learners accept that small talk isn't about clarity but about coexistence, their stress drops. They stop trying to shape the exchange and start allowing it to shape itself. That's when English stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like shared presence.
That's true, and it explains why people often feel relieved after a short, neutral conversation, even if nothing interesting happened. The relief comes from social alignment. You checked in, you shared space, and nothing went wrong. For learners, recognizing that success changes everything. You don't need laughter or depth to succeed at small talk. You need smooth entry and safe exit. When learners redefine success this way, they stop forcing energy and start trusting timing. And timing, more than words, decides whether a conversation continues.
I also think small talk feels harder today because we're used to curated communication. Messages are edited, posts are polished, replies are delayed. Small talk doesn't allow that. It's immediate and imperfect. For learners, that contrast can feel brutal. You're suddenly visible. But that visibility is what makes small talk human. When you allow yourself to be slightly unprepared, you become more approachable. And approachability is the real skill behind natural English.
And approachability doesn't come from confidence, it comes from openness. People respond to signals like relaxed tone, honest pauses, and simple reactions. Learners often chase confidence, but confidence grows after connection, not before it. Small talk is the doorway to that connection. When you walk through it gently instead of rushing, conversations stop feeling like obstacles. They feel like moments you pass through together.
So if small talk feels hard, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It usually means you're expecting too much from it. When you lower expectations and raise attention, the experience changes. Small talk becomes lighter, quieter, and surprisingly supportive. And that's often where real conversations begin. Not with perfect sentences, but with permission to be ordinary together.
I think another reason small talk feels so hard is that people confuse politeness with distance. They assume that being polite means staying shallow and neutral forever. But politeness in real conversations is actually a starting position, not a final one. Small talk begins politely and then slowly adjusts. Tone softens, responses become more personal, timing becomes more relaxed. Learners often freeze at the polite stage because they think moving past it might be inappropriate. But staying there too long creates stiffness. Small talk isn't about staying safe forever. It's about checking when it's safe to move a little closer.
Yes, and that stiffness is often what people describe as awkwardness. Not silence itself, but the feeling that nothing is allowed to change. When both people stay locked in polite mode, the conversation has no flexibility. Learners sometimes think awkwardness comes from mistakes, but it often comes from emotional flatness. When you allow even small shifts, a softer response, a brief personal comment, the energy changes. Small talk needs movement. Without it, it feels heavy.
And when we talk about movement in small talk, it's important to clarify what that actually means. Hence, movement isn't about suddenly becoming personal or emotional. It's about micro adjustments. A slightly longer answer, a softer tone, a response that reacts not just to the words, but to the feeling behind them. In real conversations, people are constantly testing this without realizing it. They offer something small and see what happens. If the other person meets it, they continue. If not, they gently pull back. Learners often miss this because they focus on content instead of signal. But small talk lives in signals. When you learn to notice them, timing, energy, openness, you stop guessing what to say. You simply respond to what's already there.
And that responsiveness creates safety, not excitement, not interest, safety. When people feel safe, they relax into the conversation instead of guarding themselves. Small talk isn't meant to impress, it's meant to disarm. Learners often try to sound confident to protect themselves, but that protection can feel distant. Softness feels closer. When you allow your responses to be slightly unfinished, slightly uncertain, you invite the other person to meet you halfway. That's why small talk feels warmer when it works. It's not polished, but it's mutual. And mutual effort is what keeps conversations alive longer than any perfect sentence.
I think this is the moment where many learners realize that small talk isn't something you control. It's something you accompany. You walk alongside it. You notice when it speeds up, when it slows down, when it's ready to end. That the mistake isn't letting a conversation end. The mistake is forcing it to continue or cutting it off too early. When learners allow conversations to find their own ending, small talk becomes less stressful. You stop measuring success by length or depth and start measuring it by ease. And ease is the most reliable sign that communication is working.
So, if small talk still feels hard, try seeing it differently. Not as something you must succeed at, but as something you share. It's not about saying more, it's about staying present a little longer than feels comfortable. When you allow that, conversations soften naturally. Pressure fades. English stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like connection. If this perspective helps you, stay with us on Off Script English. Subscribe, leave a comment, and tell us which everyday conversations you want to understand next. We're really glad you're here.